Aksaya? Aksaya?
Yes, sir, I'm there. Yes, sir.
I'm just waiting. Yes, we can begin. Ananya will introduce.
Now,
Yes.
now, yes, sir. Now I request Ms. Ananya Lakshmi to introduce the speaker of this session.
Welcome by Sujata ma'am.
Sujata ma'am, are you there, Dr. Sujata ma'am?
Okay, I will do
Yes, I am there. Yes.
Yes. Okay, sorry. Now I request Dr. Sujata Malini ma'am to give the welcome address for the speaker.
Okay. On behalf of the Department of Special Education, Alagappa University, Department of Psychology of American College, Madurai, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome today's second speaker, Dr. Cecilia Chettiar from Department of Psychology, Nanavati Women's College from Mumbai. It's a great opportunity for us to stay connected with Dr. Cecilia Chettiar. She is having a vast experience in the field of psychology, more than 15 years of experience. Her article was also available in net, like LinkedIn and other aspects, like knowing is not equal to doing. These are some of the articles to note down. And Ant and Grasshopper Indian version, and do bad things really happen to good. So these are some of the articles. So you can go through, and it's a real opportunity for us to have her amidst of all the participants to talk on happiness practices during crisis. With her vast experience, she has holded a lot of positions, and she is also having a very good membership in American Psychological Association, International Association of Cross-Cultural Psychology, Bombay Psychological Association, Indian Science Congress Association, and she has an achievement in publishing research papers and received a travel grant in 2013 to present paper at IACCF conference in California. And she has also guided more than 50 PG dissertations and attended more than 20 conferences and seminars, and talked and gave a lecture related to psychology. And in this aspect, I'm so happy that she can contribute to the field of special psychology in an effective manner. And she's also a well-renowned person in the field of psychology with the licenses and certifications related to integral somatic psychotherapy level 2 and NLP practitioner. So with a lot of credentials, she's going to share her knowledge to the participants who are with us in this today's international webinar on mental health and well-being. So in this regard, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Cecilia Chettiar, HOD, Department of Psychology, Manavati Women's College, among us. And now you can take your session, ma'am. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Akshaya Lakshmi.
Thank you. Dr. Cecilia
Hello.
Chettiar. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm here. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that extensive introduction, ma'am.
Thank you.
Very happy to be here, and I hope we can go through the next hour learning from each other. And if I can request, I don't know who's handling my slide, but if I can request for the slides to be
Aksaya, please share the screen.
Yes, ma'am. Please let me know if
Yes, thank you.
it's visible, ma'am.
All right. So what I've been asked to do is talk about happiness practices during crises. I made it crises, though I was told crisis, because it's not just one crisis. We are having one thing after another. So I don't know if we can just settle ourselves with one. How can we be happy if things are going so wrong all around us? Let's see what we can do. Let's start with the theory of crises. If you can move to the next slide. So there are 6 types of crises. If you look at the literature in psychology, there are 6 different descriptions when we try to understand a crisis. Now, a crisis can, and as you can see the years, the reason I put the years is for us to understand that people have been studying crises for a very long time, theoretically, academically. The first one, of course, is the one which we're most comfortable in working with, which is the organismic handling of a crisis. The first thing that happens if there is a problem is that we have physiological stress. I get a headache, I get migraine, I get acidity, I get a backache. So the first thing that happens is your body reacts. This is the one way of studying crisis which has been studied quite frequently. The second is what is called as the ego integrative method of studying crisis. All of us have a way of responding to the crisis, to any problem that comes to our life. Now, our response to the problem can either be based in reality or not in reality. If it's based in reality, for instance, right now, there's a pandemic. The response to it, wash your hands more often, maintain social distancing, look after people who are older than a particular age, younger than a particular age. This is reality based, this is adaptive. What is non-reality based? Non-reality based is assuming that, oh my God, I'm going to get it. I have stepped out of the house or somebody sneezed in front of me, so I'm going to die. Now, this is a non-reality based. Why am I calling it non-reality? Because even if there is an infection because of coronavirus, the percentage of people who actually die, the fatalities are not as high as media is hyping it up to be. So a non-reality based response would be panicking, getting anxiety. There are people who are so afraid that they will fall ill that they actually fall ill. So that's a non-reality based response, and that is maladaptive. The third is developmental. Of course, when we talk of developmental, we will speak of Erikson. Now, he says the way we learn to handle a crisis is a reflection of how we go through life. We know the 8 stages in Erik Erikson's developmental stages. And he says that at every stage, we come across some problem which for us at that time is like a huge crisis, and our growth is dependent on that crisis. The first time a child leaves the parents to go to school, separation anxiety, it's a massive tragedy. The first time somebody breaks your heart, it's a massive tragedy. The first time that there's a financial loss, there's bankruptcy, it seems like, oh God, it's the end of the world. But we have enough of stories in all our lives to know that after every crisis, when we have managed it, we have learned to grow and we have learned to become stronger. The byproduct has always been strength. So developmental is one other way of studying crisis. Parks talks about major changes in life space. This is very similar to what Erikson says. Life space is changing. The way we are going through life now, that life cycle is changing. The way you are experiencing life is very different from the way your parents experienced it, very different from the way your kids are going to experience it. So because we are moving from one role to another, there's a transition that we are going through. We are experiencing crisis because of the role transition, and how we then respond to it decides the outcome. Communication model, though it is an old theory, it's very much understandable or relatable to people today because it's a systems approach. A systems approach is more like you have, if you think of a computer and if you think of an input and an output, input is the problem, output is the way you respond. There are say 10 rational responses and 10 irrational responses, depending on the combination of a certain number of situational and genetic events. Accordingly, there will be a response. The last one, interpersonal and socio-cultural, currently also, which has a lot of mileage, because it depends on ultimately what your reference group is, what your social network is. When they started this theory, they weren't talking about the social network that we're talking about now, which is the Facebook and the Insta and the LinkedIn and all of that. We've just had so many crises. The past week has been hilarious at one level, painful at another level. But how you respond to it, this depends on the social network you're in. So either you are with the network or you're against the network, but you are in reference to the network. You are not functioning independent of this. Now, this may sound very heavy and theoretical, but the reason I want us to understand this is because the understanding of how we will manage our own emotion during a crisis needs us to understand how are we looking at the crisis. Are we looking at it purely in terms of physiological response? Are we looking at it as an opportunity for growth? Are we looking at it based on our role in life at that time? Is it based on the exchange of information? Because there is so much of information now, information overload, the information epidemic that has taken over. So perhaps we are responding to it because of the information epidemic in a particular way. Next slide, please. So when we put together all these different types of crises, we look at what Farad and Kaplan told us about, how many years is that, 40, 50, 60 years ago, what they refer to as the crisis syndrome. Take this slide and apply it to the current situation. There is some kind of stress that we are experiencing. Now, why is the stress? For most of us, it is the lockdown. For some of us, it is actually the fear of COVID. For some of us, it is the financial pressure, whatever it is, there's a stress. That stress is leading to a situational problem. If I have lack of money, then if I don't have money, then I don't know how to take further decisions. And now is the time for admissions in schools and colleges. So a lot of decisions have to be put on hold. It depends on the resources that are available. Now, resources can be available in multiple ways, through the government, through your own resourcefulness, through friends, through family. The stress will lead you to identify the problem. You will then examine the resources available to you, and you will check if your life goals are being threatened. Like a lot of us may have thought, okay, I'm going to retire in another 2 years and I will sit and chill and I will take care of my salary. I will use that salary to retire. But suddenly now all businesses have shut down. A lot of businesses have shut down. What we must have saved up, we are probably breaking our fixed deposits and starting to use them. So what we had planned, our life plan is under threat now. This is definitely leading to physical tension for a lot of people, unless there are some of us who have gotten into deep breathing and pranayama and yoga and are managing life peacefully. Most people are not. So from stress, we've moved on to the physical reaction, and this reaction in the body is leading to our past unresolved issues. It could be the near past, it could be the distant past. A lot of people are not recognizing this. Today's crisis is not just a crisis about COVID. Today's crisis is about a whole lot of baggage that I have been carrying, and I don't know where to throw it out. So I'm throwing it out at the government, I'm throwing it out to the opposing party, I'm throwing it out to A, B, C, anything. A lot of it is a reflection of my personal pain. It could have been a recent pain, it could have been a previous pain, long distance. It could be, I run out of finances, and what can I do? I have to yell at somebody, so I will yell at the first person. You look at availability heuristic, which we study in social psychology. What's available to your mind? What's available to your memory? That is how a lot of us are reacting to the crisis. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now if you see this little triangle, it's not very difficult to understand. You have a crisis on top. Now, most people, when they talk about a crisis, are referring to the situation. Like we had Nisarga, which was a storm which was supposed to hit Mumbai, and it happily, all of us were waiting, oh yeah, there's going to be a storm, and then suddenly it just disappeared. In half an hour, we realized it's gone off somewhere else. Thankfully, it didn't do too much of damage to the main city of Bombay, but went off elsewhere. A lot of people are focusing on the situation. What we need to figure out is the psychology. If I was just watching the news, and there are some families over here who took their little kids to the beach to show them, look, this is a storm and this is how it's going to look. And you think about the psychology of such people. Firstly, if there's a storm, you need to be careful. Just assuming that no, nothing's going to happen to me or my children because I'm in a big, huge SUV and no harm is going to come. I don't know, you may call it optimism, you may call it foolhardiness, but it was very sweet of the cops to explain to them nicely and tell them, please go home. You've got small children in the car, you can't drive off to the beach. So there's a psychological response to a situation, and that determines the nature of the crisis. When the lockdown started, a lot of pressure was because we thought it will pass. As it started extending, as we went to the third lockdown and now fourth lockdown, then the uncertainty of it has hit us, and the repercussions, the financial repercussions largely, and the reality of staying boxed in with the same set of people day in and day out in your own home. They may be family members, but we don't always like all our family members, do we? So this psychological response is what is bothering us. And since I can't yell at my parent or my spouse or my child about how frustrating it is to live with them, so let me yell at the government and I don't know, whoever is in power or not in power. Next slide, please. So then what is happiness? You may be wondering, this is supposed to be about happiness. Why is she talking only about crisis? You know, you can't really understand light till you know what darkness is. So, you know, lights shine brighter if you put it on in the dark. If you put a light on in broad daylight, it's not going to shine that bright. So the wattage is the same. The exact same reason why I wanted us to understand what we mean when we're talking about a crisis, different ways to know a crisis, and therefore what is happiness. International Day of Happiness is March 20th, when we were happily in lockdown that time. Now the joy, and positivity, which you find psychologists use more than the lay people. The lay people will use the term happiness. For the Oxford English Dictionary also, there is a definition of happy, which is about feelings. So if you look at both the definition, it's essentially about feelings. Where do your feelings come from? They come from things, they come from people, they come from situations. All these things create feelings, and one of the feelings is happiness. But the problem with things, people, and situations is these are external. There's another way that our happiness can be impacted. Sorry, that's from inside, from within us. That's from our thoughts. Of course, our thoughts can also be about things, people, and situations. But the power that we have with our thoughts is we can influence our emotions by thinking certain things. You know, if you're in a sad mood, you end up picking up sad songs. It's not that you want to be sad, but somehow you tend to relate more to sad songs. When you're happy, you tend to relate more to happy songs. So there is a mood dependent functioning. We have a mood dependent memory and a state dependent memory also. So you have your mood, your emotion, which is a function of the state that you are in, which is a function of the situation that you are in. So if you're talking about happiness, if you're talking about, I always want to be feeling comfortable, and you know, the situation is not good, I'm feeling unhappy, this is the way we are going through life, it's going to get a little complicated. Next slide, please. So there are some ways by which we can feel happy. These are the tried and tested methods. Get good grades, whatever happens. Just half an hour before I was supposed to start this, I got a call from the parent of a young 14-year-old boy, and he's just promoted to his 10th standard. And parents are calling and saying that, you know, he just refuses to study, not attending his online classes. He's only fooling around the house. He sleeps whatever time, wakes at any time. And they were all so hassled. And then the aunt was speaking to me and she said, we are a large family. We all stay close by. So she said, all 15 of us have sat and explained to the boy, but he refused to change. I was like, oh my God, 15 adults sitting and explaining to one 14-year-old boy about why he should sit in front of the screen all day. You can imagine how frustrated that boy must be. So, and obviously because of the lockdown and because of all kinds of restrictions in the buildings, I'm not able to see the boy during my practice or at the clinic. So what do we do? And the boy will not come to the phone. So I told them something very simple. Stop troubling him. Let him sleep when he wants. Let him get up when he wants. This will continue for what? Another 2 months, 3 months? What do you stand to lose? And then the whole family, I mean, they had put me on speaker and they were like, oh, no, this is his 10th standard. It's the end of his life. You know how important it is, 10th, 12th. And if this is how we are going to push our future generations into chasing numbers, is it any wonder then that we have people who only talk numbers now? The other option is, of course, some of the other pictures that you can see. I need to have a partner. I need to be in a relationship. Now, though I've put a very typical heteronormative relationship, please understand, I'm okay with whether it is heteronormative or open to all other orientations. Point is, I want a partner. I want money, I want a car, I want a home, and I want a healthy body. What is wrong with what you're asking? There's really nothing wrong. These are the things which supposedly make us happy. Do this. Next slide, please. So not all of us can go and sit on top of a mountain and say, I don't want anything and I'm sorted in life. Most of us want the basics. I don't want a very big house, but a basic in which I can have space for myself and my spouse and my children and my parents and my in-laws and whatever, and a storeroom and some space for the dog or the cat or whatever. So these are some of our basic needs which we all want to have. But okay, I won't say all, a lot of us want to have. There are some of us who would be very happy sitting on the mountain saying, I don't want anything, just leave me alone, just let me be out there looking at the clouds, talking to the sky. I'm really not interested in anything else. And it seems like those people are very happy. A few days ago, I was watching this video of this sadhu, which our Indian soldiers came across very high up in the Himalayas. If you can imagine how snowed up it was, and there was this sadhu wearing nothing. He just had a dog, and he was, when he saw these soldiers coming, he was happy and he was laughing and he was running around in the snow. He was just wearing a loincloth and he was, doing palti, rolling around in the snow like nothing bothers him, just a loincloth, and he was happy. It seemed like he was extremely happy, and the dog was also jumping and playing with him as he was doing it. And so not all of us can do that, no? Next slide, please. So for some of us, we seem to be chasing happiness. The problem is that all the happiness that we chase comes in a particular format. And the byproduct of chasing the happiness is that the bills are chasing us, the loans are chasing us, stimulus package of the government is chasing us, all kinds of things are chasing us. Is this really something that we should worry about? Is there anything wrong when we talk about all this? As we move to the next slide, I'd like to talk about something else. I've always thought, can we move to the next slide, please? So I've always thought that, we are on a treadmill chasing one goal after another. And the reason we are chasing this goal is because we've been told, do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And if you do all this, you will be happy. Because we've told is not just to the rich, but also to the poor, and everybody thinks that's the way to achieve happiness. That's what everybody's trying to do, and that is why we call it the hedonistic treadmill. What is hedonism? Wanting sensual pleasures. Means all your 5 senses should be satisfied. You should see nice things, you should hear nice things, you should smell nice things, taste nice things, feel nice things. That's all that I want. All my 5 senses should be satisfied. But the thing is, like, you see that man running with chasing behind the carrot. Can you stay with the previous slide, please? The thing is, no, bacha, previous slide. The hedonistic treadmill. Yes, thank you. The thing is, you think like you're chasing the carrot, and the carrot you're going to eventually reach, but you won't. One wonderful example of this, I want to tell you about some of these experiments which quite a few countries have done. I wonder if you've heard of this universal basic income. The concept is very simple. The government will give every citizen of the country a certain minimum amount of money every month. What will this do? This will ensure that nobody is on the road being hungry. Sounds fantastic. Benefits are so many. If I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from, or whether I have to feed my children or my parents or my spouse, and I know everybody's fed, what will I do? I will probably go out and follow my dream, or I'll probably go back to college, or I'll probably start, quit a mad job which I did not like, and just, spend a very simple life. Maybe go sit on the mountains. Some people fear that, no, this cannot work. People will become lazy if you give them this. But if you do a little bit of Googling on this, you'll find that universal basic income is not such a bad concept, or rather, is not such a new concept. A lot of people like Richard Branson of Virgin Airlines, Elon Musk. In fact, people like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, they're saying this has to happen. It's not an idealistic state. This is just practical common sense logic. It has to happen. Is it successful? Is it not? Spain has already started 462 euros per month to everyone. Finland has been doing this for about 3-4 years now, and they're doing very well. Who else? Canada started this in 2017, and they were planning to run it till 2020. But then in 2018, they packed up and they said, this is a horrible experiment, waste of money. I don't think this is helping anyone. In India, in Madhya Pradesh, in the year 2010, this experiment was done. They took 20 villages, 8 of them they gave a basic income, and 12 of them they didn't give that basic income as a control group. What were the results? The results were strangely successful for most people. So let's talk about the Indian experiment. They found that people were not wasting the money. They found that they are investing in healthcare. They found that they are investing in nutrition. They found that there is more family time, well-being increases. These were given to villagers. No? Also, they found that more people are likely to get involved in business. Entrepreneurship automatically got a boost because they don't worry, okay, will I get food? They know they will get food. So education, health, and economy, all three are getting a boost. Sikkim was supposed to start this in 2019. It was the promise of the, I think, HDF. They had said that they will make be the first state in the country to give universal basic income to everyone. Can you just imagine if you don't have to worry about where your food comes from? For some of us, we are blessed, so we don't have to, this amount may not be much. For some of us who are not so blessed, who go to sleep hungry, this would not be a problem. Would that be happiness? So if I have like 10 million in my bank account, the money that the government will give me for basic income will amount to not much. But if I have got zero, if I don't have a bank account, if I don't have a house, but I know that I will have money to eat food, what is that going to do for me? There, it is not hedonism. There, it is fulfilling basic needs. I think most mothers will agree with me that your children are, if they're extremely upset, or even your spouse, if they're extremely upset, first thing you will do is make sure they've eaten well and their stomach is full. Because problems seem smaller when your stomach is full. Your ability to adapt or to handle a problem improves. So why can't we work towards a system or a policy where we take away this hedonistic treadmill and go ahead and put something else in its place? And what is that something else now available on the next slide, my dear? Akshay, Lakshmi, if you can change it. Thank you. So we're talking about happiness, and I won't push too much into it. Essentially, if you're happy, the brain is not meant to be your center for happiness. There is no center for happiness in the brain. There is a center for thinking. There is a center for executive functioning. In terms of human evolution, if you are always happy, you might end up making some stupid decisions. So it's better to be aware rather than to chase what we call happiness. This is the part of your brain which is developed the last in terms of evolution, and yet there is no happiness center there. There is only a thinking and processing center. Next slide, please. Instead of happiness, the word that we could look at is eudaimonia, which is a term given in the Greek language, which means good spirit. We could also use it to refer to another concept in psychology, which is subjective well-being, where we're talking about both the thought process involved and the mood involved. But here we are talking not about self, but about a good life, not just for self, but for everyone else. Trying to do the best that you can, not aiming for perfectionism, but creating a more rational response to how you would want to achieve the future of your own well-being. Next slide, please. These are just some, write-ups about how there are chemicals in your brain, what we call the hormones of happiness. There are chemicals which help us feel good. And there are also chemicals you have to understand which will never make you feel good, because we have a set point. So every time, say, suppose your set point when you are 5 years old is that 5. That's the baseline. So anything that is happening above 5, so suppose your happiness becomes 6, 7, 8, you feel great. By the time you reach 10, your baseline level for happiness is not 5, it's 10. So then if you get anything which is worth 6 or 7 to you, you're no longer happy. You have to get something more than 10, which means your happiness is never fixed. Your need for things will keep increasing. Something that made you happy yesterday is not going to make you happy today. Just look at all our keyboard warriors today talking about all these issues and, posting and ranting literally on Facebook and all these social service networks, social networks. I don't know how much. I'm sure they feel the pain. But I don't know why they do it, because it seems to be blessing the reward center in their brain rather than bringing about concrete change. Next slide, please. What makes us truly happy are these 5 things. These are the 5 things that make us truly happy, and this is research-based. Just posting a message on the internet may make you feel that, oh, I've done my job for the day. but it doesn't make you feel happy. Things that make you feel happy. Slide change, please. First is savoring. Very simple. Whatever you're doing, enjoy it. Like, for example, if I tell you right now you're on a webinar talking about happiness and you've been listening to something from 3 o'clock, enjoy it. If I tell you, you may say, no, it's not so enjoyable. Even if you're not enjoying it, can you try and be here? Stay in the moment. Take some moments to process the situation. Maybe take a video, take a photo, record something that you can use. Discuss about this or the discussions about this talk or any other talk with somebody else later. Focus. This is something which your grandmother and my grandmother, I'm sure, has told us. Pay attention to what you're doing when you're doing it. Don't be distracted. Just focus on this. The richest people today are not the people who are affluent with money, but the people who are affluent with time. And you will understand this because you've been in a lockdown. Imagine what our lives were before we had time. Today also, I know in lockdown, people are working like crazy, and especially for women, they have to manage their office, stay online, manage their kids' online studies, and look after the house. So not much has changed. But you know that travel, getting out of this space, some things have changed. Maybe, I'm hoping, some things have changed. So enjoy that. If it is only 1% that has changed, focus on that 1%. That is called savoring. Next slide, please. Next slide is about gratitude. Be thankful. The amount of research on this. There is one practice you can create in yourself today. It is gratitude. One, you have to be humble to be grateful. And it is also profoundly countercultural. And the reason I say this is because we are kind of in a culture where we are all about, oh, you know, I have this and I have this and let me post this on Facebook and let me say I did this. Like, I'll do this talk and then I'm going to post it on Facebook, say, oh, I did a talk with so many participants. It's not very humble, no? But if you can be humble and say, wow, perhaps I didn't deserve it, but I got it. So I'm blessed and I'm lucky. This will take care of your happiness a lot more than probably the fanciest mobile phone. We have a lot of unpleasant emotions and a lot of pain in our hearts over a period of time. Some of them we are able to work through, some of them we are not. But just feeling grateful allows you to break free from those emotions. Even if you don't share things about how grateful you are, even if you just keep it in your heart, it really does wonders for your brain, and not just for your mind, but for your brain. It creates change in your brain. Next slide, please. Kindness is what we are going to talk about next. There's always this controversy about, can anyone be truly 100% kind? Like doing something just for the sake of helping others and expecting nothing in return. Altruism, is that completely possible? I'm not sure. We will put it as a question mark and I will allow you to decide whether it's right or whether it is wrong. But the fact that whenever you help somebody else, whenever you give, you feel better. And there's a very nice study which says that compared to churchgoers and people who exercise, health and lifespan is better for people who are kind, which means being nice to other people helps you make your brain feel better because the reward centers in your brain are lit up. The reward centers in your brain are lit up means you don't have to have alcohol and drugs to light up the brain centers. You just have to be nice to someone else. It reduces pain, stress, gets rid of, helps you manage your blood pressure and your diabetes, and it's contagious because if you're constantly nice to a lot of other people, eventually they also start being nice. Next slide, please. Exercise and sleep, two basic things. I know exercise has become a little difficult in this lockdown, but we all know this, that exercise releases certain hormones which are feel-good hormones. It helps you get rid of stress. It improves your memory. It helps manage attention better simply because people who have problems with attention also have a lot of energy which they need to burn up. So when they are physically very active, they're able to burn up the energy a little more. They're able to then pay attention better, which allows them to keep their memories intact. Exercising is much better than all the train your brain exercises which are on the phone. Sleep, there is sleep. I mean, what is so difficult about sleeping? And there are so many people who are so proud of, oh, I slept just 2 hours, oh, I slept just 3 hours. There's nothing to be proud about. If you're an adult human being and you cannot sleep, something is very, very wrong. Please resolve that first, because it's a cycle, it's a domino effect. You don't sleep well, you don't eat well, there's not proper digestion, all kinds of other things going wrong. Like we had a speaker before us speaking about how messed up our bodies can be. Just sleep. You have time now, sleep. And if you feel that I don't have time, it is a problem with time management, not a problem with manage your time better. Next slide, please. While I talk of happiness, I would like us all to remember that I'm not underestimating the fear, the pain, the panic, and the darkness which is caused by this black dog called depression. I'm in no way belittling that. Depression is too huge to be covered in a talk like this and to say that, oh, just eat, sleep well, and your depression will go. You know, depression is different. Depression is not something that can be countered by fighting for routines which will create a dose of happiness. Okay, but yes, it means a lot of professional help is required. But to be happy, you don't really need professional help. Next slide, please. I'd like to ask what's wrong with being unhappy. This society, this culture has been forcing us to believe that happiness is the only way to live. I was talking to another 23-year-old young woman who's going through some very challenging time in her life, and she was like, but how can I be happy if I be sad? I'm like, who's asking you to be happy? Be sad. If something goes wrong in your life, you will be sad. Be sad, be miserable. Process that grief, process that pain, and then come out of it. Work through it. You can't make great food without, you take fresh raw vegetables, you cut it, you wash it, you chop it, you cook it, you boil it, you mash it, and then you get great food. So to have a great outcome, you don't stay with just the raw ingredients, you work on it. And that process of work is what is called being unhappy, unfortunately. Instead of saying self-work, we call it being unhappy. Next slide, please. So what does crisis do in our lives? Crisis leads to growth. There is, everyone talks about post-traumatic stress disorder. Very few are talking about post-traumatic growth. Crisis leads to growth, and growth will always make you happy. So instead of fearing your crisis, accept the crisis and say, okay, damn, what can I learn from this? And how am I going to grow after this? Next slide, please. I'd like to end by saying that crisis is not in the situation, it is in the response to the situation that you've had. All right. And that's all that there is. The next slide, I think, is the last slide, ma'am. If you can just, yes, that's it. Thank you very much. That's my book. Go buy it and follow me on social media. My book is also available on Kindle because I don't know if Amazon is delivering yet to all cities. So there you have it. It's possible to be happy in crisis if you don't go chasing happiness and just chase your well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
A lot of learning. I guess there are a few questions.
Yes, please. I don't know if you have time though. Yeah, okay, we do.
Yeah. We'll restrict the timing. Like we have 10 more minutes, ma'am. So like 3 or 4 questions we'll restrict to that.
Okay, thank you.
The first question is from Dr. M. Suganti. Please unmute yourself, ma'am. It's Dr. M. Suganti. Please unmute yourself, ma'am.
Hi, Dr.
I will go.
Are you there?
Just a minute, ma'am. Sorry.
You can go for next one.
Yes. So next person is. Sorry,
name
ma'am.
is
There is some
displayed.
technical reason. Yes.
No issues.
1 second.
They can post the questions on chat, I think, then, if that works.
Okay. There is a question from Karimun. Okay.
Karimunisha Syed.
Yes, Karimunisha Syed. Yes, you are unmuted now.
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Just your lecture is really wonderful, ma'am. Very interesting, very intuitive. Ma'am, just I wanted to ask, like usually we try to link our happiness with others, particularly in the interpersonal relationships. So why do you think that we do like that?
Because that's how we've been taught. In school, have you been taught to just be happy? Have you been told just go sit by the window, look at the sun and look at the birds chirping and tell me what you feel? No, that's not what we've been taught. Have your parents told you go just sit by yourself and chill and enjoy the weather or watch the sunrise or listen to the birds chirp? No. We've not been taught how to experience joy with ourselves. We've always been taught to experience things with others, which is great because we are social beings and we need to be connected with each other.
Yes.
If you travel by flight, you know, when the oxygen mask drops, they say first put it on yourself, then put it on the person next to you, even if the person next to you is a child, which means self-help is most important. We have made such a bad word out of the word selfish. We say that being selfless is the most powerful thing, but the word selfless means self is less, and selfish is very bad.
Yes.
How can we then learn to find happiness with ourselves if we've never been taught this?
Yeah,
Looking for
definitely.
yourself, loving yourself is considered, unfortunately, selfish.
Definitely, ma'am. True. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If there is any question from YouTube Live or FB Live, we can have that question. Dr. Sujata Mani, ma'am.
I think still now I haven't got any question.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
All right. Nice. That means I've convinced everyone that you just have to be happy with yourself. Very nice.
No question.
There is
Yes,
From
somebody
the participant side, is there any other question?
there is a person like IGX3. The name is not written. So can you unmute yourself, sir? You have raised your hand, sir or ma'am. I'm sorry. Hello.
Yeah, hi. I'm not able to hear the voice very loudly, so whoever is speaking.
As participants, you can unmute yourself. Yes, there is another person who has raised the hand. Renuka?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Can I
Go on with your question.
Hello?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. It
Yes.
was a wonderful session because nowadays it's very essential thing that mental unrest or mental illness or mentally we have become fatigue. We'll get fatigueness and all those things. But when a person in deep depression state, hello, ma'am, are you? When a person in depression state, how can that person overcome the depression and try to be happy? In that situation, how oneself by himself, by herself.
Clinical depression is not something that I can cover in a program like this. This is not about clinical depression. If someone is in deep depression, as you say, they need to see a therapist. You need professional help.
Okay, ma'am.
Get a therapist, get a psychiatrist also involved if required, and then work out. Once they establish a certain base level of functioning, then perhaps these rituals, these routines.
Okay, ma'am. Does counseling work at all? Counseling works.
Of course. You're asking a psychologist if counseling works. You know, somebody mentioned this at one of the higher level education meetings, that in the future, perhaps subjects like commerce and management may not have a very bright future in the distance some years from now. But it is the humanities and the social sciences, especially psychology, sociology, which will make a big difference, because we have to learn how to manage people more than we have to learn how to manage our books, because books are managed by artificial intelligence and by software now.
Yes, yes.
So people management and counseling is a structured, systematic, research and evidence-based method of bringing about well-being in everyone.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renuka ma'am, for the question, and thank you, Suprema. So the next question is from Runalini. Please unmute yourself, Runalini.
Good evening, all of you, madam. Madam, I just want to know the parents of children with disabilities. We need to be supporting them every then and there, often and often. So being happy with a disabled child, having a disabled child is always a question. How to support them better in a psychologist's point of view? I am a special educator. I want to know from a psychologist, how well can I support a parent, some parents of children with disabilities?
So one of the ways that seem to help parents a lot is when you allow them to look at their purpose of life. When they look not just at the fact that they've got a disabled child, because that's not a nice term to use, when they have a special child, there is a reason why the child, like I said, if some difficult situation comes in your life, don't focus on the difficulty, focus on how you can improve, become stronger and a better person because of this difficult situation in your life. The problem is we have established norms, no unwritten rules that, oh, your life is complete only if you have a perfect child and a perfect husband and a perfect house and a perfect career. Yeah, so if you want to support these parents, you need to tell them that look at where your life can grow, where you can improve as a person, because every child, every human being, no matter how much you think they are unable, eventually find their way at functioning. There are some who are, of course, extremely dependent, but a large majority of them can function with a fair amount of independence. Allow them that independence. Stop trying to protect them everywhere. They have to fall, that's when they will learn to get up. If you stop trying to prevent their fall, then they will not be afraid of falling, and they will know that when I want to get up, my parents are there next to me. But so it's okay to fall. Here our problem is we don't want the child to fall only. Then how will he grow? So support the parents by not looking at it as a challenge.
Thank you, Mrinali
Yeah,
ma'am. Thank you. So the next question is from Marimuthu B. So please, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, your session was really excellent. Most needed thing actually. As a rehabilitation profession, we all work as a team, especially in terms of in aspects of physiotherapy thing. Many people are quitting away from this rehabilitation setup and they're going for some other thing which they really want to show some big results, because most of the thing with neurological cases or something like a permanent disability which is going to be, we cannot show them the cure, but they try to quit away from this and they go out of this field to show big results in other conditions like orthopedic or sports, some other thing they divert. One question was this thing. So how to manage these people or how to make them retain in this field is one thing. And second thing is like most of the professions we work, still we the people who retain here, mostly we get, or sometimes also we also get so much of depression because of seeing those people who suffer and those families who really do a lot for the children. Sometimes we get depressed. How to overcome these things actually?
So firstly, if you are in a space where you're working with in an emotionally challenging situation, like we also work with, very young kids who are rescued from brothel. My master's students, have to intern with such places, and some of these girls are like 9, 10 years old, rescued from brothel. It's emotionally very heartbreaking. Don't try to be happy all the time.
Hello.
Don't aim to be happy. If it hurts you, it hurts. Accept the hurt, accept the pain, take some time off, process that pain, maybe see a therapist once every 2-3 months just because you want to unburden yourself. Don't think that the only people do just because I'm a rehabilitation specialist, I don't need therapy. All of us need therapy. We are all messed up in our own ways. Also, when you are faced with such painful situations, like I said, our own triggers, our own past experiences are, provoked, and that is also something that bothers us. So don't be afraid of the sadness. Don't try to be happy when you are in a field which emotionally wears you out on a daily basis. Come back home from work, take some time off. Maybe don't go home, immediately. Go sit somewhere in a park or by the beach. Work through your pain and then go back. And be grateful. Gratitude, as I said, that you are in a position to make a difference in the lives of these people who have come to you. That is how you will handle your sadness. Your question again is about that of the parents. For parents, like I said, the existential perspective works much better. Trying to understand what is the meaning and purpose. Like allow them to read books by Purpose of Life, Meaning of Life by Viktor Frankl. Allow them to read the lives of a whole lot of other people. Nick Vujicic, the guy who's born, the motivational speaker without both limbs. Look at what all he's achieved. There are Special Olympics people, who manage these kind of, having physical disabilities, have managed wonderfully. Neurological disabilities, where you know that the person cannot have focused, concentrated attention to complete a task with the limited physical capacities. The challenge is You have to tell the parent that the child is here to teach you some lesson in life. Learn that life lesson, and that is what you need to take forward, because you can't be happy all the time. You're human. You
No,
have to try.
no, I have tried this thing, ma'am, but parents tell us like, you cannot feel my suffering. They tell like that. Sometimes it hurts a lot actually.
Yes, I cannot feel your suffering because I don't have a child like that. I completely agree with you. I cannot feel your suffering. But I want to be able to help you to not look at this as just a suffering. Look at this as an opportunity to be of service to someone who's less. We cannot take away the pain. And sometimes all that they want, no, you don't even try to make them feel happy, I would suggest. Tell them if they're feeling so upset to go and speak to a therapist to deal with the pain. But what you need to be able to do is just to be available to listen to them pour out their frustration. Because sometimes they just want someone to listen. And recommend, and if you feel overwhelmed, please ask them to meet a therapist.
Thank you for the wonderful answer, ma'am. Thank you,
Good evening, ma'am.
for the question.
Akshaya,
Yes,
there are
yes,
some
ma'am.
questions in the chat box. You can ask that.
Yes, ma'am. So there is a question from the chat box. I will just read it, ma'am. The question is from Jayakumar R. Generally, problematic students are in the classroom. How we can manage, madam? Can we manage the problematic
students? No, I'm just thinking you're asking there are problematic students in the classroom. Right now, as I sit in this lockdown, I'm missing all the problematic students of my classroom. I get to see them only through Zoom. So I think after a certain age, make the students your friends. The students have a lot more to teach us. We have little. See, we may think we are teachers and we're standing in the class and we know a lot. What I know is my subject because I've taught the same thing for so many years. I may know the latest research, but my student is a different generation. They have an exposure and knowledge about so many things that I don't know. So rather than making it a one-way traffic, make it two-way traffic and say, if I have 4 lectures in a week, 2 lectures I will teach you, 2 lectures you teach me. Just hand over some power into the hand of the problematic child. And of course, the causes for the problems will be different. And our classrooms are huge. But see if you can find out, take the most problematic child and figure out what the problem is. Spend some time talking, just give a listening ear. Maybe you'll come up with a much better solution.
Thank you, ma'am. So there is yet another question from Kanagalakshmi. I will just read out the question. Ma'am, you said humility makes us happy. I strongly agree. But in sometimes highly informative session, people underestimate. Again, it makes me unhappy. Give suggestion to overcome this, ma'am. Sometimes she feels when people humiliate her, she feels unhappy. But how to overcome that?
Take the remote control of your life in your hands. There's a very nice line attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt. Nobody can insult you or hurt you without permission.
Hello, ma'am.
Someone is acting high and mighty, trying to put you down, that's their problem. You know that someone who feels very small will try to act extra big. So don't worry, bless them and say, God bless you, you feel good, and continue. You don't need somebody else to validate you. The minute you give the remote control of your life to someone else and say, oh my God, you said that, and because you said that, I'm feeling bad, your remote control is in their hands. Take it back. You can say whatever you want to say. You can give me bad words on the forum. I don't care. It reflects on you, not on me. You cannot be understood by someone on a forum, someone who doesn't even know you. Chill, relax, let them say what they want.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, the next question is from Mamta. Mamta, are you there?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, I guess Sujay sir is starting.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you will be given the chance. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah. So my question is, when children enter in a secondary school level,
Can you please speak aloud, Mamta ma'am? Can you please speak aloud?
I am speaking very loud actually.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you.
So when children enter in the secondary school, they are in the age of middle. They are not neither the adult, neither they are young. So when we try to say something like good things, not good things, there is again a judgment. But when we try to say things to them, they feel that everyone in the world schooling them why they are doing that. So I don't know, like I feel sometimes helpless to talk with that kind of age group.
You know, no matter how helpless you feel, you keep doing what you're doing. Because today that child may behave rudely with you, no matter how nice you're trying to be. But 5 years, 10 years down the line, no, these kids will always remember you and come back to you. So
Yeah,
you focus on your reaction to them. If
I feel
possible,
more responsible that as a parent you are responsible for one or two, but as a teacher you are responsible for your whole class. So yeah, sometimes it comes like that, that am I doing full justice to my job or not?
yes. So if you have these moments of reflection, share your thoughts with someone. Have a mentor in your field. It's always best. Somehow in India, I don't know why the concept of a mentor has not picked up.
Seriously.
If so, identify a mentor. Talk to that person who's a little more experienced and say that I have certain challenges at work. Is there a different way that I can do this? Also, constantly keep upgrading yourself. Work on yourself. And I say this all the time to every question. I tell everyone, please go in for therapy. Please don't think it's only for people who are having major problems. If you're at baseline, you can always become better than what you are right now.
Yeah.
Seek the help of a professional to help you identify what are the triggers and what are your strengths and how you can get past it. Find a career coach, find a mentor, find someone senior at work who can guide.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
And don't try to take on the burden of the whole world.
That's true.
Thank you so much.
So
the next question is from Sujay Chandra Biswas.
Hello, ma'am. Namaste.
Yes, sir.
Namaste.
May I, Sujay Chandra Biswas, calling from West Bengal. My question is: a child fear on mathematics subject in the classroom. How the process for development on mathematics of the child?
So you child mathematics.
A child fear on mathematics subject in the classroom situation. Hello.
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 Yes. So fear of maths is a very common phobia, and I think one of the leading mathematicians of this country explained this to me very nicely. He said that the reason children in India are so afraid of math is because it's taught to us in a way that scares us. We are not always taught in the best possible way. Also, when your child says, I have got less marks in English versus your child says, I have got less marks in math, what is your reaction? For you, you will not give so much attention, but if your child has got less marks in math, you will panic more. So all these things combined together. Find a teacher or a tuition teacher who can help your child make friends with math. A lot of hand-holding by the teacher is more important, not the teaching, but the hand-holding and emotional support for the child is more important. Okay.
Thank you for the answer, ma'am. So we will have the last two questions and we will move on to the vote of thanks. Yes. Omar, yes, please unmute yourself, sir. Omar.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello, madam. Congratulations for your outstanding thoughts and ideas that really were inspiring. Just one thing I would like to get your thoughts about. It's the following. Don't you think that happiness is more intrinsic? And sharing rather than receiving. Thanks a lot for your
patience.
Thank
you. I agree with you. I agree with you. In fact, in one of my earlier slides, that's what I had mentioned. I had talked about things, people, and situations which are external to happiness. And I spoke about some things which are internal to happiness. And I think the entire gist of my talk has been that we have put too much of emphasis on the external when we need to be looking at things. The concept of eudaimonia is more about bringing out your best self, talking about things that matter to you. Yes, there is intrinsic. In fact, even when I was talking about this universal income, the concept was that there is an element of basic external need satisfaction. So your intrinsic emotions are allowed to flourish.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
The last question is from Sankara Narayanan. Sir, unmute yourself, sir. Sankara Narayanan, sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
What is the difference between happiness and peacefulness?
Sorry?
And peacefulness.
Just mute. Okay, sorry. Just a minute, ma'am. It's not audible. Please unmute yourself, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what was the question? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
He asked what is the difference between happiness and peace?
Happiness is what a child would experience when they are jumping in the rain, water. Peace is probably what I would experience when I'm sitting on top of the mountain like this. Yeah. So neurochemically, happiness is a different set of neurochemicals. Peace is, as I think the gentleman spoke earlier, Omar, where you don't necessarily have to be unhappy or happy. You can be in a no zone. You know, there's a very nice story about when somebody went up to Buddha and asked him, if there is only one thing which I should give up on this life, what is it? And he says, ati, which means excess. Give up on excess. So happiness for us, unfortunately, means excess of so many things. Peace just means being with what you have, where you are, and being in a state of neutrality, which is positive. And I know that's a contradiction. It's neutrality which is positive. Read up about it. You'll get some very interesting ideas about it.
Thank you, ma'am. So just like the last question, I will say from the chat box, ma'am.
Yeah.
What are the simple daily practices that will make us happier? This is a question from Yashwinder Kapil. What are the simple daily practices that will make us happier?
Yeah, simple daily practices. Eat on time, sleep on time. Very, very basic. All right. Establish a routine. Spend some time alone with yourself, even if it is 10 minutes. And when I say spend some time, I don't mean spend some time looking at the phone or listening to music. All external stimulus has to be switched off. If you prefer keeping your eyes open, then do so. If you want to keep your eyes closed, do so. But just be alone with yourself. Don't try to stop your thoughts. We are not all Buddha. Thoughts will come. Let them come, let them go. We are not interested in what they are doing. Just be. This is one of the most powerful tools. And if people could just take 10 minutes out of their 24-hour schedule to just be. And I will tell you this, add to this a very basic deep breathing exercise, which is universally known as diaphragmatic breathing, but which in our country we refer to as the pranayam. Inhale and exhale, 10 counts in the morning, 10 counts at night. Just do that and watch your body, the physiological response become healthier. Watch your mind calm down and watch your ability to deal with the world improve. As your ability to deal with the world improves, you start feeling a lot more at peace. That's where you'll eventually be happier at.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I just want to...
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your patience answering and everything.
No problem.
A lot of questions and lot of things. Yeah, Akshaya.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Now I request Dr. Sujata Malini ma'am and Dr. Suresh Kumar sir to deliver the vote of thanks and also give feedback.
Yeah. Who is first? So anyhow.
Yes, ma'am. You can go ahead. Sureshma sir.
Sir is there or not?
I'm not able to unmute him, ma'am. So please do proceed. Yes, ma'am.
So it gives me immense pleasure, ma'am, for extending a formal vote of thanks. Right from the session, I am so happy that you have given a very informative and very important knowledge that is the need of an hour. So at the outset, I'm so happy to extend a sincere thanks for your presence in this session and extending vast knowledge in the field of psychology, which is an important topic of happiness, which is a need of an hour in a very elaborative and informative way. And I'm so happy, and it is evinced through the questions raised by the participants, and they have interacted with you and they have clarified their doubts effectively. And you are also explaining all the concepts in a very, understandable and very easy manner, so that it will be reaching to all the participants who are with us. So in this aspect, I take my pleasure to extend my sincere thanks for both the speakers, Dr. Veena Vani and Dr. Sushila Chettiar, for being with us for this 2-hour session in the international webinar on mental health and wellness during COVID-19, and sharing their vast knowledge with all the participants in an effective manner and informative way. So in this aspect, I take this opportunity to thank all the participants for joining with us and expressing their ideas and their questions also, and clarifying their doubts. So I also thank all the participants. I also thank Akshaya and Ananya for being with us and supporting us. And I also thank coordinator, Dr. Suresh Kumar Murugesan, for coordinating this wonderful session for all our participants. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.